Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, bud. It's good to be here.
Dude, so to catch everybody up, you have no idea why you're here.
No idea.
It's like we want to talk to you about something, and here you are on a podcast. So
love it.
Dude.
I like surprises. You'll get the authentic me that way, I guess, right?
Oh, totally.
No time to plan or prepare.
Totally. It's funny when you prepare, it just ruins the whole thing, because then you're like, well, I already told that story. And then you're like, well, I didn't tell that story to anybody. Like, it was just us having conversations. So yeah, trying to keep, as much conversation out of it until we kind of get going. So here we go. Dude, first of all, I think I've told you this before, but I always remember my first coffee with you. It was downtown Portland, and I had reached out, and it was the scariest thing in the world because this was the Patrick Palmer.
Oh,
and I remember being totally scared because it was such a big deal. And I didn't know you. All I knew is your resume. Like, I had seen what you'd done, and I'm like, this dude could make or break me. Like, this guy could be the biggest meeting of my life. I told Mindy about it. I'm like, I'm meeting with Patrick Palmer. So like, that was to go from there to like, now just being buddies is so funny because I just didn't know you personally. And I love that I've gotten to know you so much, obviously better now, but you grew up in this industry kind of a rock star. Was that fast, or walk us through the beginning of your getting into the business?
I don't think it didn't feel fast, I guess. I mean, I did start very young, which helped. So I was young going through a lot of it. I mean, the day I got out of college, I started in this business. I've never done anything since. It's all I've ever known.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think this is my 29th year. I don't look 70, but I don't feel 70. One of the things that me and some friends and business partners wanted to do is we wanted to start our own gig. And I think that once we started our own company, that's when people started to kind of notice. But before that, I was an originator, and I loved the industry, and I just wanted to continue to kind of go down the path of mortgage banking and help other people get into the industry or launch careers or launch teams or grow teams. And so I think that's kind of what we ended up earning a reputation for.
So you started as a loan officer for who?
The first company that I worked for was actually Norwest.
Oh my gosh.
I did cut my teeth in the banking system. I worked at Norwest, and then got into the banker model, worked for Mortgage One, which most people here locally know way back. And then when Mortgage One went out of business, we ended up working at First Horizon before starting Alpine Mortgage.
So you went through, and actually that was not a market correction, right? That when M1 went out of business, that was more a management issue at the time or whatever. There was a lot of, I just remember the controversy around it because I got into the business up here when I moved up in 2000 as an AE. I remember everybody I meet, I was like, so where'd you used to work before this? So like Mortgage One, like everybody did. Yeah. So you had gone through a company shutting down and having to kind of move over and make a new name for yourself, or at least rebrand the company you went to.
Yeah, and learn a different channel. I mean, at that time, it wasn't known as First Horizon, which became a big national mortgage lender, but it was 8 or 9 different companies from around the country owned by one big parent company. So we had to learn how to use new tools, become more banking mindset, different rules of compliance, different regulators, and originating in that environment, we had to learn overnight. So I did learn, in that particular case, you better be ready to pack up and transition quickly at times. And as you know, we've seen that this year.
Yeah, it is interesting in the mortgage industry how that can happen. I mean, as we record this right now, 3 days ago, one of the big banks just shut everybody's systems down. Like, you do have to be a little bit nimble. It's a good lesson to learn, but it's a hard and painful lesson, and shouldn't be one we'd have to learn, but it does happen sometimes.
It happens, yeah.
So you bounce back, get going in the industry. When did you become a leader in the industry? Like, when did you really get some sort of management position or start growing in that career?
So my first job in what I would call management, I wouldn't call it leadership, but I did manage a branch at, I think I was 25 years old was the first branch that I started managing. So I had been originating pretty early. I'd been originating for maybe 3 years at that point. And I started managing my first branch, and everybody in the branch was older than me.
Oh yeah.
So there's you learn a lot quickly when you're managing people that are more experienced, older than you, gifted, talents. Like it was a really good opportunity.
So how'd you do that? Like, how'd you learn it all?
I really asked people if I could sit down with them and learn their business. And I think it was easy spot to be humble in because a lot of the people around me had had some success, even though a lot of them were still pretty young. They had had a lot of success. I remember Paul Dean was one of the guys that he had been in the business for a long time and had a really good reputation and had done a significant amount of volume. And he sat across the hallway from me, and I would just go in there in the late afternoons or evenings when he was kind of starting to settle into his prospecting process and just say, "Hey man, can I learn from you?" And I think when I started doing that, I realized that if I built relationships with the people, I could keep it from being adversarial. Like the first day that I got the job, I could tell right away there was a lot of people who were like, "Oh, you're just a young little, snotty kid. Like, don't tell me what to do." And fortunately enough, I had a father who would kind of say, "Hey, here's probably how you should go about it." So I had some good guidance too.
Yeah. So as a manager, instead of walking in and going, "I kind of know what I'm doing here," you went in and said, "I need help. I need to see how you guys are doing it and learn from the best."
Yeah. And also, what do you guys want to see? Like, for this place to be better or for us to do things, like, I'm pretty good at bulldogging stuff. Like, I don't really let stuff go. Once I have a kind of a hold on it and I feel like it's something we need, I'm going to go wrestle it to the ground. And I felt like if I could be that person for them, then, I would help them out. And hopefully at some point they would have respect for me. I guess that was the whole goal in the beginning, was I just want these people to like me. And when you don't know much about leadership, I see people go two ways when they get their first management job. Either I want to be the authoritarian and kind of set the tone, or I want everybody to be my friend. And you start on one of those paths typically. And if you're good, then you start to draw back to having some level of balance.
It is tough. I mean, especially when you work with such talented people and you're, walking into that as the boss. I totally agree. You can't walk in like you know it all, but you also can't walk in too, calm and like, "I don't know anything. I'm just a manager here." Like, I like that you found that balance. When did you spin off and start your own thing?
So December of 2002, we left First Horizon and we launched Alpine as a brokerage firm. The funny thing is we had no intent of leading people. Like, I didn't leave and go, I have this grand vision of leaving here and starting something that will become what it ultimately became. I think what we wanted to do is there was 5 of us and we were like, look, we just kind of want to control our own destiny and control our own pace. And we want to dictate what the margins look like and the customer service and their experience. And we wanted to build it from that standpoint. And we didn't feel like if we went somewhere else, whether it was a bank or a different brokerage, that we would be able to create what we really wanted to create. So that was the intention why we left, was we just wanted to take our teams and we wanted to create something for our consumers that we controlled, that we knew that they would like. And what ended up happening was that like a week later, people said, "Hey, we want to come join you."
A week later?
Yeah, it was literally, truly a week later. Like, we barely got our lease done and we had some people say, "Hey, we want to come join you," a week later. And mind you, at the time, I'm maybe 28 years old. I really don't have business owning anything, much less owning something and leading other people.
Right.
I mean, I certainly didn't have any business doing that. And then we were like, young and naive, and we're kind of like, "Oh, well, okay, if these folks come over and they like to do business the way we want to do business, then we'll take those revenues and we'll pay the bills and life becomes easier, you think. You don't know what you don't know, right? So we said, "Yeah, sure, come over." And, call it fate, call it divine intervention, whatever. The space next door happened to be empty. So we got into a sublease. We didn't really have any space, but for us, because we only planned for us to go with our teams. The space next door happened to be empty, so we just grabbed the space next door without really thinking about any business consequence or financial consequence. Just good people. We like them. We want to work with them. We've worked with them before. Boom, put them over. Then you're thrust into a leadership role, whether you want it or not. Now people are depending on you. Their families are depending upon you, and you better figure out how to learn it.
Had you guys had conversations at that point? Like, I've seen this a lot. 5 superstar originators are like, "Let's get together and not pay a split anymore and kind of do our own thing." But like, how do you figure out who's going to be the CEO and like who's going to do the math? Like, who's going to do the CFO stuff? Or were you just like, "Let's just do this," and then all of a sudden you had to figure out a hierarchy?
We had basically a plan to run it like a law firm, right? So you got basically 5 managing partners, and one person would take the day-to-day operations, and then one person would kind of run the operational infrastructure. So IT, licensing, compliance, all that stuff. And they would get paid, right, to manage those components of it. But everybody produced, And then you're right. It was very much, let's keep it small, keep it all. Let's
Right.
start this and we can get rid of the bank's layer and their cost and we can do what we want to do with the money or the revenues. So that's how it started. What ended up happening is that when people started joining us and we started having greater responsibility than just our own teams and this really small little business to manage, that's when we realized we're going to have to organize. And the way that we did it, and I was fortunate that I just had really good partners who didn't have a lot of ego. Mm-hmm. Let's just break this down by our strengths and the things that we like to do.
Nice.
And so we had somebody who was, Ed Coker, who was really into tech and really into process and really into systems. It wasn't so much into people. He'd be the first person to tell you that. I'm not letting out any secrets. And he's the kind of guy who's like, give me a manual and I'll go figure this out. And he did. He set up all of our servers and set up all of our vendors and
Wow.
and did it from scratch. And then we had some other, one other guy, Mike Young at the time, he really was into marketing. He was into database management, categorizing databases and figuring out how to market and how to automate the marketing piece. So we kind of just, said, let's just divide and then we can conquer. If we do this without ego, it wasn't really until 4 or 5 or 6 years later, as it started getting bigger and bigger and we started having multiple branches, then we really figured out that, okay, we need one person to be the CEO. Everybody else still needs to be specialized. But the way that we go about making decisions still has to be collegial, right? Not one person. But at the end of the day, if we can't figure out what decision to make, one person has to be the tiebreaker. And I was fortunate enough that they said, hey, we feel like you have a good pulse on what people's needs are, plus your origination practice. So it's going to be you. And that's kind of how Alpine and then later Pinnacle moved on from there.
So how did you do that with your origination business? So because you all originated still, right? I mean, Ed Coker's setting up the entire infrastructure, technology infrastructure while he's still, banging out loans. How do you do it and maintain the distance between the two and also your sanity?
Yeah. So fortunately for us, most of us had been coached and most of us already had teams. And so we brought really high powered teams with us. I had an assistant who was licensed and she was amazing at basically every part of the loan business. And then we also had some really solid processors. So it took a lot of the weight off of the technical origination piece. And really what ended up happening is that we would spend our time kind of split between running the company and maintaining our referral partners and our referral networks.
Gotcha.
And so I would tell you right away, I'm the first person to say that there's no way I could have originated 100% of all of those loans without a ton of help on the processing side, loan officer assistant side, somebody doing the marketing on my behalf, and me being the person that just came in, did the consult with the client, advised them, and then worked to maintain those referral partnerships. So that's kind of how it got divvied up. We had really strong, deep benches.
Was coaching a big part of that?
It was a
did
big
your
part
coach
of
help
it.
you figure out how many people you needed and how to budget for that and make sure you don't have too many?
Yeah, that was actually the one thing that we did before we started the company was, I think at a Todd Duncan event, I signed my first coaching contract with Building Champions in 2001.
Oh, wow.
So I've been, to this day, I don't know
With
how many.
Was it Michael?
No, it was Greg Harkavy, Daniel's
right,
brother.
yeah.
And Greg was my coach for 17 or 18 years.
Oh my gosh.
Straight. And then Michael took over 4 or 5 years ago. And so one of the first things that I did is I got with him and I said, hey, we want to start this and we want to leave. And so before we started the company, like the back part of the story that very few people know is that the journey of the process that I went through with my coach and Mike and Ed went through with their coaches, which were also Building Champions, was really deep. Like they made us do a lot of work. Like, how are you going to vet this out? How are you going to make this decision? How are you going to get licensing? What's your capital structure going to be? What's your entity formation going to be? So without some coaching and some really good mentors, I don't know that we ever make it past that stage because I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing. I know how to do a loan really well. Right? That's it.
Wow, that is awesome. And I know you've told them that, like how much they meant to you, but just freaking amazing that having somebody that isn't in the business, look at it with some good guidance and some good knowledge and wisdom to be able to help you along gives you that, it's almost like I don't want to call it a crutch, but it's like it's the thing that basically lifts you up to be able to, get you over that wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this too, from a coaching perspective, the people that I met in the industry through that group, even you and I being in a coaching group and some of the other folks that we know, in 2007, when things were really melting down, I was invited to a CEO roundtable that had some of the industry's, what I would call most experienced and brightest CEOs in the room at the time. And I probably learned more in that 8 hours than I had learned on my own for the previous, 5 or 6 years. And so just, by having access to really smart people who do the business right for a long time, then I got to know them, build relationships with them, and I could pick up the phone and call them, and they would give me, guidance or names and phone numbers for people who had warehouse lines or trading partners or anything in the business, right? I mean, and that's how, thankfully I was part of that network, and that's how we built a lot of what we did.
It's such a big deal. Like I pause on this and just really spend some time. I wasn't in coaching. I had never been coached. I was trying to do it, putting everything on my shoulders, trying to figure out how to do it. I had a mentor, but never this coaching experience. And so I get invited to go start with Building Champions in the Masters Coach program. Sean McCluskey got me into that, and a few others. And so they, talked them into bringing this vendor into the group. And I'll never forget, I was so scared to walk into that first meeting because I'm like, these guys all do loans. They're going to hate me. I'm not good enough to be in this group. And I was dealing with a lot of that, which Bill Hart coached me through most of that. But getting in there and like standing next to people going, wait, you deal with that too? Like, oh, well, how'd you get through it? Like, that's kind of like the genesis of me wanting to do this podcast is like, how do we get the greatest minds like I've been able to do in rooms where we can all connect and figure things out, and you can pick up the phone and call anybody. I know you and Blodgett call each other all the time. And it's that coaching that kind of carries you through. And those really, you never know which one is going to be who you need at that moment.
Yeah.
But somebody's going to say something. You're going to be like, that dude understands what I just went through. I'm going to go have a chat. And huge deal.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that in our industry, you find way more people who want to help you, even though they work at a direct competitor, when you run in those circles. You find people with great mindsets of abundance, and they understand that market share is a big, vast thing. And not one of us has more than 1, 2, 3, 4% market share of an entire market. And the help that comes from that is not only do you build good business acumen, but there's some really deep friendships that come out of that.
Yeah, awesome. So you roll into 2007. When was the first time you realized this could be a problem?
The first time I realized it was probably February or March of 2007, we started to see some of the subprime companies go down, and we weren't really doing any subprime business. We were primarily an A-paper Fannie Freddie shop, but we were doing some of the Alt-A stuff. So Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and some of the non-owner occupied high LTV stuff. And as the summer started to come around, it felt like it was getting worse, but I didn't feel like it was, going off the rails or anything. But I remember, because of how much it shook me up, August 7th was the actual day. We got a fax from Lehman Brothers, who had a small subsidiary called Aurora Loan Services, I believe. I'm getting I got to reach back. We didn't talk about this, so you're asking me to draw my memory. ALS, yeah, they were based in Denver. They sent us a fax, and we had already funded a decent chunk of loans, and they were on our warehouse line out for sale to them. And they said, hey, these products are discontinued immediately. So I'm waking up the next morning knowing I don't know what I'm going to do with these, right? And for those that know, I can't sell them. I got nowhere to sell them to, because it was kind of the one product. Big learning lesson for me is don't do a loan with a company that you're selling them to that you don't have somebody else you can sell the risk to, even if you have to take a loss on it, commonly known as a cover bid. But you didn't know those things back then, right? I'm selling a loan to a product for somebody has it, and we're underwriting it, and off we go. So that was the first bit of we're probably going to take a big loss here. Now we're scrambling. After that, right, Lehman, Bear Stearns kind of either file for bankruptcy or go down and get sold off to other bigger banks. And that's when the snowball effect starts to happen. And then it's pretty much on from August 07 till 09-ish, late 08-ish.
You don't have to say the number, but do you in your head remember the exact number of loans you had to get rid of?
Oh, yeah.
It's just like straight up, never forget that moment. How'd you do it?
We called all of our employees that late that night. I think the fax we got, I want to say, was like 7 p.m.
Oh, wow.
So we were you're already closed for the day. You basically are going to walk into this thing in the morning if you're not paying attention. Luckily, I think this was this will tell you about faxing. We were getting our faxes to our email, so we thought we were super cool.
Oh, you had eFax or JFax.
We thought we were the
nice,
baddest, most tech savvy company ever. So I pop it open on my phone. I see this, and I'm like, I call Ed right away. We called our team, and they actually started working that night. And the next morning, we got in, and we just basically started trying to find a way to reach out to the clients if it was a stated income type deal or non-owner type deal. We just basically try to figure out how to restructure them after they're on the line. And it was a decent number of them. Now, a good chunk of them we got sold, a chunk of them we didn't. And we basically ended up paying down the principal. Warehouse lines were a lot different back then too. Like you would pay the principal curtailment like 1/10 over a 10-month period. Like sometime after that, the warehouse lenders were like, "You owe us the money right now." Had it been like that, I don't know that we would have survived that 3 or 4 month period if we couldn't pay kind of 1/10 of the principal balance on some of these loans.
The whole principal balance.
Yeah.
So over 10, you're paying a 30-year mortgage in 10 months.
Yeah.
Jeez. And then you just collect payments, and all of a sudden you're servicing that loan?
You're the servicer now. Yeah. You own the loan, and you got to figure out like how it's going to pay off if you can't structure it and sell it somewhere else. And eventually we ended up just kind of taking a haircut on the note rates and or the note amounts and getting them sold off just so that we could get our cash back. But not without damages. I mean, and I don't really know anybody that went through that period without. Like that was the one thing that I learned is that this go around, I don't beat myself up when the market does stuff that's funky.
Yeah.
Like if I'm really consistent in my principles and I feel like we're running the business really well, but the market takes a dump, like I spent the better part of 9 months just beating myself up saying I missed this, or I was asleep at the wheel, or I'm not a good leader. And so it just, I tormented myself, and I'm also a little more mature now. I was like, 29, 30 years old at the time. So now it's like, the market's going to do what it's going to do. I just need to stick to the things that I know will get us through.
So going through it the first time, you didn't know. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of, what was I thinking? What was I doing? At the same time for you, because this is 2007, you had family stuff that was going on at the same time, right? You just had a baby?
I had a baby in October, so August was kind of the first big hit to us as a business, and then
2 months later. So she's 7 months pregnant when you're finding this stuff out.
Yeah, true.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so little Morgan, my youngest, who's now a freshman, I can't believe it. She's 15, which kind of puts some context to how long ago that is and how many of the wounds heal and scar over time. But, she ended up having some health issues that year and being sick. And so, as we were kind of kicking it and talking earlier, like I would go to work and have all kinds of stress at work. And usually you have that chance to come home and you have a little bit of safety, calmness, like get yourself kind of right to go back to work the next day. But I would come home and come home to a sick kid who didn't sleep.
Oh my gosh.
Therefore I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
You remember Steve Scanlon?
Of course. Yeah. I
Okay.
love Steve
So
Scanlon.
there's a great end to that story about the kid, by the way. Steve's wife, we had taken my daughter to see like 7 physicians or something crazy. She kept having this weird pitching, with this weird ear infection, and she would get it, and she would take antibiotics, and it would go away. And 4 weeks later, she'd get another one and go away. And they put tubes in her ears, and then they were going to try to take her tonsils out. They couldn't figure out. They were coming up with all these weird diagnoses, and I was like, I don't know. Anyways, so Steve's wife says at the time, you need to go see a naturopath.
Oh wow.
And I was like, I'm taking her like 7 doctors. I get files. Like, I'm out of my, like, if you haven't slept for a year, you've been through some times where you don't sleep and the stress is high, your anxiety is out of control, and you're just like, you're pulling your, like, everything is frustrating. Well, this whole process, not only was work frustrating, but this is frustrating. We do. And I remember the appointment because the naturopath says, oh, this kid is allergic to milk. You need to stop feeding the kid milk at night.
Oh my God.
And I just shook my, I'm just like, I can't, I'm like, you're wrong. It can't be this. She's, blah, 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 whatever. Take the kid off milk. This kid never got sick again.
Are you serious?
So she was drinking milk at night. The milk, your ears and your nose and your throat are all tied together.
Yeah.
And she didn't have fully developed ear canals, which I didn't know at the time, obviously. And so the milk would kind of leak back into her ears as she's sucking on a baba or her sippy cup at night. And every 4 weeks, that's how long it takes the bacteria to grow in your ear canal. And she spotted it like that.
No way.
And what a huge relief.
Oh, yeah.
for that part to be gone, because we were thinking really scary stuff. Like, is this leukemia? Is this something that's
Right.
undetected? Like, cause it just, when your kid gets 105-degree fever every fourth week, like clockwork, and you're rushing them to the hospital, you're just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Literally, I can't do this at work, and I can't do this. Like, it's just,
So
I remember the relief of that day.
Yeah.
That's what the point of that little section there was, I just remember how relieved I was when it actually went away.
Right.
Yeah.
Because one thing was working now.
Yeah.
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 Jeez.
And the most important thing, really, right? I mean, for those of us that have kids, when you hold your baby and your baby is crying, and it's like, that's the most important thing. Like, I mean, I could probably figure out how to get a job. I'm not going to be able to figure out how to fix this. So that actually was more stressful than work.
Strange question. When you think back to that time, is there a color you see in that time? Like, my example is when I think back to 2020, it's all dark. Like, I can't see much. I can feel it, and I remember what happened. But if I was to remember sitting in my office or my office in the basement that we had to set up in 2020, I remember everything being really dark. Like, I honestly think the lights were off, yet they were not. I mean, they were on the whole time.
I don't know that I have a color. I remember how it made my physical body feel.
Yeah.
Like, I could remember getting up in the morning in the shower, and I could feel myself like have tremors, like in my
Really?
in my traps. And I can remember like how many, like, when you have really tense muscles for a long time, you get knots and muscle adhesions. And I can remember getting up in the morning, and I can remember taking a shower and kind of just, feeling that a little bit. And then feeling throughout the day, having episodes of anxious thinking and physical, whether it's tight stomach or like slight hyperventilation. Like, so I can remember that stuff more than maybe a color. I think the thing that I remember most is I was trying to figure out, when does it end?
Right.
Like I couldn't see how does this end? How do we get out of it? What's the direction or the path to take? So like, in fact, we did this ad at Alpine, and we put them on the sides of buses. And big shout out to Jen Tushner, who was our marketing director at the time. But it was like, basically we blacked out the side of the bus, and our triangle was coming through this like light at the end of the tunnel. And it said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's called it's Alpine Mortgage Planning.
Oh my gosh.
And like, I remember just repeating to them, I was like, I just want to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
Like, we're going through this dark tunnel, and I'm like, I'm just searching for light. Like, let me find the light. And turns out that they turned a marketing slogan out of it and painted a TriMet bus.
I love marketing people.
This is a great idea. It would take your pain and be creative and turn it into something cool. And she did.
So you don't know when it's going to end. Obviously it's affecting you physically. What were the things that were healthy for you at the time? Was there anything that you were like, you can look back on and go, when I did this, I felt better? Or
so I had a mentor who had run big companies, multi-billion-dollar revenue companies. And I was like, what do you do in times like these? Because he had been through some big crashes, and he worked in construction, like big commercial construction. He's like, you have to learn how to take your day, sometimes minutes at a time. And so he told me the story where I'll go to work at 8:00, and I just say, like, I need to make it between now and 11. And then I can take a break. I'll leave, I'll take a walk, I'll go out. And I've been repeating these for years in my little video series. Is like, sometimes you got to understand that I need to live in 2-hour blocks. And I found that when I did that, I stopped my mind from going 6 months from now, 8 months from now, laying people off, running out of money, being sued by all these people. Because like, that stuff starts coming at you. There's no possible way to think.
Right.
You're basically acting with your amygdala, and you're not. Nothing in your prefrontal cortex can fire. And I started doing that, and then it was kind of around that time that I found the bike, and I got into bike racing for some time. And I was like, I need something that I can go and just go really, really hard at for 1 hour at a time and burn tons of cortisol. So between that level of working out and trying to figure out how to break my day into smaller increments so that I wouldn't be future thinking, and I wouldn't be, dwelling on the past. I just need to focus on what I need to do for the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then just kind of block those together. I've been doing that basically for the last 6 months.
Wow. Let tomorrow worry about itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing you can really do about the worry sometimes. Like tomorrow's going to happen. And so I can remember during that time thinking, right now I'm good.
Yeah.
Like just taking those moments and going like, breathe it in. You know, your kid smiles at you and you're like, okay, right now I'm good. Like catch every good feeling when you're going through that negative time. And hugely valuable. And that breaking up your day, I love that you're saying like you can look forward 8 months and it's going to super suck. Like there's no in 07, 08, there's no story that you can tell that's going to happen that this is going to come out great, right? That you're going to go through some pain and it's going to last, who knows how long. Today, I don't have to think about that.
Right.
Unless there's a decision that needs to be made today, let's put that off and deal with it later.
And for every leader there is. I mean, I would venture to say that every leader has probably had to let go of somebody they really care about this year, probably for the first time in the business in a while. And you're right. Like sometimes those decisions are on you for that day, and you say, okay, I have to make the best decisions for the company and the best decisions to keep us in play until this does kind of stabilize, so to speak. And those days are extra crappy. But you start to realize that, okay, I can deal with them. Yeah. I can deal with them, and the people are going to be okay, and they may even come back. Like a lot of the people that worked for me during those times that we ended up having to let go of just for pure economic reasons, many of them came back once, not even once, but some of them twice. And they know that's part of this business as well if they've been in it for any given time. And it's never fun, but I found like if the conversations were had in the right way with the right spirit and you did everything that you could and exhausted everything that you could to keep them employed, that they actually came back and helped us at other times when we were really in need for scale. And so it's not till you get some hindsight and some distance from those situations, you realize that, okay, this isn't going to turn out all bad.
Right.
Even for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because just today, like literally I'm walking to get lunch and I get a call from a buddy and he's like, I'm going to have to do some things, personnel wise that I don't want to do. But the story he told me, he's like, so basically we've been hemorrhaging money and I've just been basically pouring my money down the toilet over the last, 8-9 months. And he's like, I haven't made money in 9 months as a company and I've been losing my net worth as an individual. And I'm finally to the point where I can't do that anymore, but I don't want to break the hearts of these people. They're hardworking people. Like, how do I do this? And it was so interesting that he felt so guilty. And I was like, that heart right there is what has to come out in that conversation because they need to see, I don't want to, have to do this, but I've tried everything. And so are you just as open as you can possibly be in those conversations? Like
100%. Like even to the degree where we'll tell our people, this is the level of volume that we need at this staffing level to break even. And if we get there, like right now, I'm not trying to make profit. Like if we can break even or make $1 profit, like that's where we're trying to be. We just can't go backwards in big chunks because when we do that, then the entire operation is jeopardized. Right? You run into either covenant problems with your warehouse lenders. If you're an owner, you run into bigger balance sheet issues. But even someone running a branch, let's say, right? You go negative, and now all of a sudden, all of your decisions are taken away, and you don't get to make the decisions anymore. Right. Somebody from up above tells your people they got to go, and then they likely don't have the same relationship that you have with them. So I think, being transparent to the best that you can, right, without giving away stuff that you really shouldn't as an operator, then you do that and you make them a part of it. And we've had that. Like right now, we have some people that are like, look, I'm in a position where I can cut back to 20 hours a week and go to part-time. And so if that saves my job till we get through to the next time, but you don't find that out unless you have really deep conversations with people and know where they're at, both at home and their families, and like, are they the primary source of income? Are they not? Are they single parents? And I think when we try to do that, you end up getting the best possible result, even though you got to make tough decisions.
Right. I imagine some people might go, "Oh, this is awesome. I've been working, so many hours over the last few years. It'll be great to get like a part-time gig going," which would be a killer surprise because you're holding all this anxiety for this conversation that ends up turning out not as bad as you thought it would be.
I had 2 of those. Yeah. Like at the end of the year. And my commitment to the folks on my team was, the last couple of years were really good and I reserved much more than I probably needed to. But when things got bad, I think a lot of them expected us to make cuts in like third quarter when they knew things were bad. And I said, I'm committed I know where my resources are. I'm committed to getting everybody through the holidays. And if I can finish the year, then we have to maybe make some new plans if things don't change. If I don't see certain metrics move, and that's what I was committed to. And because I had reserved it and I knew where my resources were, and I knew kind of like how much runway you have, so to speak. And when I had the conversation with them, like two of them who I've known, one of them for 13 years, right? So these aren't people that just came to work for me. These are people that I have more than a decade experience with. They're like, well, we really thought this was going to happen in August. And I'm just grateful that we made it all the way to the end of the year.
Yeah.
And they're not naive. They see they see companies shutting down. They see the Finance of America deal. They see the Flagstar deal. They see that companies have to make moves when the volume drops 60 or 70%.
Right.
And so, and you're right. And by being transparent, kind of telling people what our game plan was and what our vision for our teammates was, that conversation is they understand it more rather than you just pull the carpet out from underneath them and they're shocked. They show up one day and they no longer have a job.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you said you bring math to them and you're like, this is the math. This is what we have to do. I think there's a lot of people that haven't done the math.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of hanging in there. And that's what, I mean, we being, most of our clients are mortgage, we went to math first. We're like, we got to figure this math out because I need to know where are we, what happens if we lose clients, what happens if, our biggest client shuts down. You've got to run all these scenarios and then figure out, okay, well then what do we need to break even every month? How long do we have as a runway? Like all that math has to be done before making personnel decisions.
Yeah.
Because you can't, in right mind, go to somebody and be like, I don't know if we're going to be okay, but just in case you need to go. Like that's not a conversation you can have with somebody. You've got to, know whether or not, what's the metric that would allow you to keep X amount of people.
Well, it's not even good business because then, like, as you know, acquiring talent is really hard, and then training them and getting them up to speed and getting them assimilated into your culture and working together with teammates. There's a huge investment that goes into that. So you're right. It's like if you don't know where the company stands and how much runway you have or how much you can burn and for how long, then making those decisions is like you got it backwards. You got to go the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about coaching being a huge part of it. I want to bring up journaling because we were chatting earlier about journaling, and I journaled the first time when Mindy and I were going through, I think it was year 12 of our marriage, and we were struggling through marriage. I think years 7 and 12 were the worst years, and at 12 years, my wife gave me a notepad, and she's like, "I want you to just write things down," and I'm like, "Dear diary," like I thought it was such a stupid idea. And somebody else told me, I wish I could remember who else was like, you just need to journal. And I was like, fine, I'll do it. And so every day I would write a note to Mindy, and then I would write something I love about her. And I put it on the nightstand, and then sometime during the next day, she'd pick it up, read it, and then write me a note back. And so we just did note writing back and forth. And some of my notes were like, today, sucked. I hated my job. I hated this and that. And but I love you. Like, and others were like, you said this thing yesterday that drove me absolutely insane. I would just start writing all about it. But I found the more I wrote, the more I figured myself out. And I think that's what got me addicted to journaling. And I do it, all the time now. So you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. So oddly enough, when I was younger, I really struggled, really struggled with anxiety, like panic attack anxiety. And so, I grew up in a really rural part of Southern Oregon and never flew on an airplane until I was an adult. And I remember when I first started flying, like I would have these panic attacks. And so my first experience with journaling was that I was working with a therapist, and she's like, "I want you to journal when you're on the plane.
Oh, wow.
When you're in the midst of having a panic attack, I want you to journal."
Get a pen and paper.
I'm like, "What?"
my
And so I did, and I started realizing that, okay, I started writing down my thoughts, my what ifs. What if this plane crashes? What if I die? What if I can't breathe? And I started seeing patterns in my thinking that were largely what if to the negative side. And that was my first start with journaling, and I just kind of kept with it. And it was a big deal in coaching with my coach, and I would journal in the mornings, and I would journal a little bit in the afternoon, and I did it all throughout my career. I mean, through the really, really good times. And I remember that even though business was really good during COVID, there was a lot of other things that for me were not really good. I mean, the kids being at home and not in school, and their ups and downs and their relationships with friends. And so my journaling moved away from journaling about woes at work or highs or being grateful at work, which I was. But I can tell my patterns of journaling when I go back and read them, it's really fascinating. Like recently, into this last year, I went back and read a lot of the stuff from 2007 and 2008.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I still have them all. It's crazy, and I can tell when I'm anxiously writing. I can tell in my handwriting if I was anxious at the time I was writing those words.
Really?
Yeah.
Is your vocab different in those times? Are you using, is the handwriting sloppier?
It's sloppier and jagged. It's like I'm trying to get through it. It's almost like well, you know the feeling. If you know the feeling of your thoughts coming at you so fast that you can't organize them really. So I can tell when I'm journaling that I'm trying to get as much down as I can, and my handwriting will get really jagged, and yeah, it's some of it's not legible, frankly, but I can by getting a couple words, I can kind of figure out what was going on in my mind.
When you went back to 07, 08 in that journal recently, like, did it help? Like, did it give you some things where you're like, okay?
Yeah, and it helped largely in one way, which is realizing at the time that I had never been through anything like that from a work perspective. And now realizing that not only had I been through that, but many other, both ups and downs in the business world. And I think the one thing that I took away last year, in fact, I had this conversation with my coach. I was like, I'm incredibly calm. I almost feel like something's wrong.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, no, that's just a life of preparation. And I talk about being prepared a lot in the stuff that I do with my teammates. Like when we're prepared, we don't have as much anxiety. And I realized that all those years of journaling and being in all sorts of different situations and making decisions, good and bad, big mistakes as well as big wins. And I realized by reading that, it's like, when you're young, you don't know and you haven't been there before, but that consistency over time and preparation and learning from all the things that we didn't do right then, because we did do a lot of things wrong. Like we made decisions out of fear. We could have invested in some more things. We could have actually grown more. We could have taken more market share had I not been as afraid as I was about managing capital or money or cash flow. And so you learn those things too. Like I learned in this market, there's going to be an unreal opportunity in the space of consolidation. Like mortgage companies are going to come together, groups are going to come together, leaders are going to be available that hadn't been available for years. And this time my focus has been on that versus not doing as many transactions or locks being down or staff being, needing to be moderated. So those are all the things that I've learned. But that's not just from that one section, right? It starts there by kind of learning how to deal with it. And then it moves across the last 13, 14 years.
That's so cool. So fear basically makes you're not thinking about things you can control. You're thinking about things you can't control.
Yeah.
You've tossed the fear aside and gone, okay, what do I have control over? And then let's do that. Because knowing you as much as I've known you for the last couple of years, I don't see fear in you. Like that's the best part. When we have conversations in groups, I just don't see anybody. Like even the meetings we've had recently where the market's, horrible, the group that we are with is like, all right, what do you guys got? Like, what's the plan? How do we get through this? It hasn't been nearly the same fear that I saw back in 07, 08. And it really has been way more strategy of like, yeah, these are details and these are facts. And so let's figure out how to move through them.
Do you think that's because of the level of experience in those rooms? Like the people you're talking to have kind of been there, done that. And I do too. And what comes out of a lot of those conversations, the people who seem to have less fear and are attacking the market seem to be the people who have really strong vision and they have really strong plans for how to get there.
Yeah.
And so it's not that it doesn't concern them because I'm still like, hey, when is this going to end? It's not comfortable, but I'm more focused on what is our vision and where are the opportunities and how do we attack them? And do we have a plan for our existing people as well? Like what can we do to help them survive this? And I don't like the question I had for you the other day, and I don't even know where to get this number. Maybe you don't either, but it's like, I mean, how many people are going to surrender their licenses this year? And what does the market look like if that competitive pressure is not there? It's all of those things. Like how do we focus on taking market share and focusing on our vision rather than all the things that maybe have been taken away from us or the market shifting or, realtors leaving the space or whatever. I see that with the people that we tend to hang out with, I see they're very, very vision focused and very focused on, okay, how do I turn this market into an opportunity for the organization?
Yep. Well, dude, this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think everybody's going to get a ton out of this.
It's always great to hang with you. We have the best conversations.
Always. All right, man. Thanks.
Thanks.